Skyrim, also known as the Old Kingdom, Throat of the World, Fatherland, or Kaisel in Dragon language. It is a vast region set in the northern part of Tamriel. It is the home of the Nords, large and hardy men and women who have a strong resistance to frost, both natural and magical. The Nords are a race native to Skyrim. Nords consider themselves to be the children of the sky, and they call Skyrim the Throat of the World because it was where the sky first brought the north winds upon the land and formed them. Breath and voice are a vital essence of a Nord. The art of breathing, speech, and articulation is with them. The art of speech is usually associated with the goddess Dibella. The art of the Thu'um, or storm voice, is associated with Kinnereth, who gave man the ability to speak. And Skyrim, also known as the Old Kingdom or Fatherland, was the first region of Tamriel settled by humans from the continent of Atmora, the hardy, brave, warlike Nords whose descendants still occupy this rugged land. But in order for us to understand the Nords more, we have to go back, way back, to the Mythic Era. During the Mythic Era, a legendary Atmorian leader named Ysgramor led an expedition from Atmora across the Sea of Ghost to the land that would later be known as Skyrim. Back then, the land of Skyrim was called the Land of Mirith, in recognition of the vast number of Myr that lived there, and it was the first region of Tamriel to be settled by humans, according to the legend. And according to other legends, Ysgramor landed first at Sadikhed, at the extreme northern tip of Skyrim, in Skyrim's Broken Cape. And it's also believed that Ysgramor and his companions were fleeing a civil war in Atmora, which at that time had a sizable population. The Atmorians settled in the area that we now know as Winterhold. They eventually built a city in the region and named it Southall, and for a long while, relations between the Snow Elves and the Atmorians were very peaceful. But eventually, the peace was broken, and a terrible battle ensued, and they called this battle the Night of Tears. It is also known as the Crying Night, and it was a massacre inflicted by the Snow Elves upon the Atmorian settlers of Skyrim in the late Mythic Era. The great city of Southall was the first major Atmorian settlement in Skyrim, as well as the first city of men in the continent of Tamriel. One night, an invading force of Snow Elves descended upon Southall and slaughtered the inhabitants. The city itself was burned to the ground, and these events became known as the Night of Tears. Nobody knows why the Snow Elves decided to attack the Atmorians, but it was originally believed that the Snow Elves' motives were to exterminate the Atmorians came from the realization of how big the population was growing, and if left unchecked, the numbers of the Atmorians would be a great threat to the Elvish civilization on Tamriel. But Imperial scholars believe that the Snow Elves attacked Southall simply because they feared the Atmorian culture would surpass their own, and thus sought to drive the men from their land. And some reports suggest that the initial attack on Southall was very, very focused and did not appear to correlate to any locations that were established as points of defence or importance. Not only did the elves know the apparent layout of the city, but their assault was based on a specific directive and perhaps a singular goal. And they believed that when Southall was originally built, the Atmorians found a source of great power located underneath its foundations and attempted to keep it buried. And when the Myr learned of this, they wanted this powerful object for themselves. Ysgramor and his sons Ingol and Eilgar survived, and they fled back to Atmora, but would later return with an army known as the First 500 Companions to reclaim Southall and lead a reprisal campaign against the Snow Elves. Ysgramor succeeded, and the ruined city was successfully retaken and eventually rebuilt. Ysgramor and his army then hunted the Snow Elves and other Myr alike, ending the dominion of Myr over Skyrim and making it possible for the rise of men on Tamriel, and thus establishing the First Empire. Any remaining Snow Elves were brutally bound and burnt alive, or chained and enslaved. And this part of the Nordic history was labelled the Return, and it led to a long-lasting prejudice between men and Mer. On the Night of Tears, almost the entire human population of Skyrim was wiped out, and only 3 people were rumoured to survive, and that was Ysgramor and his 2 sons, and they escaped on the last longboat back to their homeland at Mora. And upon arriving to Atmora, Ysgramor told stories of treacherous elves, and then decided to gather an army to come back to avenge the lost souls of Skyrim. This was known as the Day of Final Passage, and Ysgramor and his army of 500 companions left the port of Jilkurvik on the continent of Atmora to sail back to Merith and take back what was rightfully theirs. But the voyage was met with disaster. During the voyage to Merith, the 500 companions got caught in a gigantic storm called the Storm of Separation, and as a result, the legendary Ysgramor lost his eldest son, Ingel, and Ingel's barrow was made as a proper burial place for the Atmorian warrior. And shortly after the first 500 companions arrived at Sarikhed, Southall was taken back from the elvish kind, and the first goal of the 500 was fulfilled, and the next was yet to plan. This led to the creation of the Circle of Captains, and the Circle of Captains was assembled and decided that every captain and his crew should go their own way. Thus began the period of genocidal slaughter of the elves. After the victory of reclaiming Southall, the first 500 had to decide on what to do next, as there was a huge unexplored continent ready for taming and countless elves to slay. During the first assembly, it was decided that every captain and its crew should go their own way, and as a result, the first 500 companions spread all over Tamriel. The first notable event to be recorded was the founding of Whiterun. The crew of the Jorvaska, under the command of Jirik of the River, scouted the area and later named it Whiterun Hold. They found a mysterious monument that was feared by the local elves and decided to put it to proper use. The lands in this valley were suitable for harvest as well. The crew settled there, and they did not know that they had started a settlement that would later grow into a great city that still stood in the 4th Era. And the second notable event to be recorded was the founding of Windhelm. The crews of the Kalkaz, Saudonrieth and Yilgamet were under the command of the Harbinger Ysgramor. They fought the elves in this area and later named it Eastmarch. This is where Ysgramor stumbled upon his son's grave, and in his grief decided to build a great city where the nearby White River met the Sea of Ghost. The city was to serve as a monument of all mankind. It was built by elven captives in Atmorian fashion. A long bridge was built as the only entrance to the city, so that no elf could sneak in unnoticed to avenge his own kind. And just like Whiterun, Windhelm still stood in the 4th Era, and is one of the biggest cities in Skyrim. The period, along with the great expansion of mankind and the merciless reprisal campaign against the elves, ended with the death of Ysgramor, and the news of his death spread like a dark cloud all over Tamriel, and most of the warriors put down their weapons in grief, never to pick them up again. Ysgramor chose to be buried at sea, looking in the direction of his true homeland at Mora. But even after the death of the Great Harbinger, his castle served the High Kings for many generations after. However, by the end of the Return, man had already gained a permanent standing in Skyrim. Snow elves had been banished underground, to emerge only thousands of years later as beasts known as Falmer. Tamriel soon became the only home for men, as Atmora had froze beyond recognition, and it had ceased to be a haven of settlement and survivability. Also, when the Atmorians came to Skyrim, they brought with them their history and culture, including their religion. Their religion focused on worship of animal gods, and their chief deity was the dragon. Just as dragons ruled supreme in Atmora, with the dragon priests being their lieutenants, to whom actual governance was left, the same occurred in Tamriel. But this is a story for another time, as this led to the event called the Dragon War. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed my first lore video. If you did enjoy it, give a thumbs up, like, comment and subscribe, and Let me know what you want to know next. I'll catch you in the next one real soon.